Finally got SportsKey on the table.
There ya.
How you doing, lads?
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Good, you know. Thanks for having us.
Good.
It's been a
Come on.
pleasure to come here. See all over the airwaves, so it's good to touch base.
Come on.
Man them.
So, where we going? I was going to go straight in with these guys.
Yeah, man, I
Straight
think,
in.
yeah.
Can you just explain to the viewers a bit about what you do?
Yeah, so essentially, SportsKey is a Birmingham-based community sports and development organisation. We just generally try and get the community active in a variety of ways. One of our main levers to get the community active is our community programme. So we run a range of physical activity in the community, mainly like Northwest Birmingham. So we run anything from community football, netball, badminton, boxercise, cycling. We've even got a buggy runs programme for I say parents, but it's mainly women with toddlers who want to exercise whilst they've got their kids.
That sounds live, man.
Yeah, it's big still. We do it from Sandwell Park when you're ready.
Yeah, man.
And we even have table tennis, and there's probably activities I've missed out. But over the years, we've always just tried to find new ways to get people from the community active in various different ways, basically. And that's just been an evolving piece of work that's been our bread and butter. Alongside that, just to add, we try and make sure finance is not a barrier to anything we do. So for a lot of our activities, so if you take badminton, we provide all the rackets, all the shuttlecocks, everything that's needed for people to just come down and take part, as opposed to needing to buy stuff or pay high entry fees to come and engage and take part in what we do. Aside from that, we've got a youth mentor program, so we mentor young people and connect them with sport as well. Probably come on to that a bit later. We have a volunteer program, so each year we try and hand select 10 young people and take them on a proper journey of development. So we qualify them in a range of different sports in the hope that they'll be qualified and then they can be our future leaders, so they'll lead our sessions, and therefore we're not paying continually external instructors to come and help us basically run the sport. So that's just our way of developing young people and the young people in the ecosystem. We do events, so we've done everything from massive sports and culture events to parties, and generally just anything to try and bring the community together. Just to add, we've got a community of practice program which looks at local organisations a bit similar to us who are kind of more ethnic black led coming together, and we all just go on different workshops to learn things that we didn't know before, from AI to cryptocurrency to governance to funding. So we've been running that for a while as well with different organisations locally. So yeah, just growing and developing. But that is SportsKey as it stands in a nutshell.
Yo, sounds like you do a lot, man.
Yeah, it's a
Sounds like you're doing good things in the community.
Yeah, it's time to chill, but gotta keep going, innit?
Yeah, there's no ceiling to what we do, which is a good thing.
Your options are always open, kind of thing. Yeah, bringing people together.
How long you been operating for?
So we started operating to the community in 2015. We set up the organisation in 2013, and that was pretty much on the back of the London 2012 Olympics. So at the time when the Olympics finished, there was a whole big legacy plan which was focused around getting disadvantaged people, particularly from ethnic minorities, involved in sport and physical activity due to health inequalities, with certain ethnic groups and communities. We felt that we was in a good place to be able to produce certain activities for our community, particularly living shared experiences, living amongst the same community, coming from certain backgrounds within sport, going to university, and we recognised that a lot of funding at the time was going to middle agencies as opposed to the heart of the community. So our passion, drove us to begin SportsKey from 2013 onwards. So that's when we started to come together and set up a plan.
So you've been in the game for a few years, man.
Nearly
a decade.
Yeah, it's funny because it's kind of like we've got 2 anniversaries. So we've had the 10-year anniversary before when we set up the organisation in 2013, but we've also got a 10-year anniversary coming up of when we started delivering our services to the community, which is the one that we're going to celebrate because that's when we were about visually as a service to the people that we were trying to serve.
Now, congratulations, man. A lot of companies don't last that long, to be honest with you.
But it's interesting when you say we've been in the game, because even at the time when Jeff approached me about setting up SportsKey for the community, I worked in sports. I worked for boxing. I worked for ABA, and sort of at the time I sort of saw not with boxing in particular, but with a lot of the middle agencies. It goes back to what me and Mike were talking about off camera. What was happening is a lot of middle agencies were getting millions of government funding, saying that they're going to go and work in the heart of communities, with people from ethnic backgrounds, with disadvantaged communities, but they became unstuck because whilst a lot of those sports organisations had the technical knowledge, this is how you do a backhand, or this is how you do this kick in football, they didn't have the cultural competence or the way, or they weren't able to socially connect with people from those communities, so they were just becoming unstuck, and that's why we felt that we had a good place. And for me, working in the system, the middle agencies, it just became a constant churn of them getting money, coming to organisations like SportsKey and trying to give us crumbs for short-term investment for what were long-term, deep-rooted problems. So
let me just stop you there. So
sorry.
I just want to make sure that we're understanding this. So you got larger organisations with like big teams, great at admin, they can write bids perfectly, everything looks pretty on paper. They'll get the money and then they'll come to SportsKey to actually deliver it.
Yeah, not just SportsKey, but I'm just
but as an
the
example,
volume of community organisations that have started from a passion to help people, what happens more than not, and it's not just in our sector, it's right the world around, but they'll come and be like, oh, we've got this level of funding, because we have never had funding to do that type of work we want to do. Everyone just sees it as the holy grail, but actually if we understood the whole pie as opposed to a quarter of the pie that they're giving us, our mindset would change in that regard. But I'm seeing this, so I'm seeing what it is, the whole pie, and what people are getting in terms of part of the pie, and expected to make these drastic changes in their community. So I suppose what I'm getting at is, whilst I was working in the system, we had SportsKey, and I was always taking the learnings from what was going on in my work and applying it to SportsKey and alongside, and so was Jev.
Sorry, I just want to make it very clear. So these people are getting a big fund and they'll come to a SportsKey and just pay you for like the session or whatever. They'll just ask you, what's your rate for a session? Cool, tick box, take some pictures, then go back to whoever gave them the actual funding and say, oh yeah, look, we've done it.
Exactly.
Here's the data.
Data, as you know, data.
Probably barely even mention SportsKey and keep it moving.
Look at one line. You know them ones.
Oh, working in collaboration.
Credit
Yeah,
SportsKey.
Yeah.
But yeah, in a nutshell, that's it. It's taking the data, taking the imageries. I'm not going to say they're totally presenting it as their own, but they're certainly saying that we've helped and worked with these community to make this happen. And I suppose for me, it was recognising that over time, and recognising actually, with my professional experience, Jev's professional experience, we can flip that on its head and directly go to the powers that be when it comes to funding. Because I think a lot of community organisations and sports clubs, they all start from passion. No one starts it from wanting to write funding bids or wanting to do finance. They start it from wanting to do something in their community. But what we didn't want to do is constantly have our hands in our pockets, like a lot of sports clubs who start that way.
And fail that way.
And possibly failed that way, do you know what I mean? Or just scrimping and scraping, in some instances can't even feed their family, or wife's asking for money and got money because you've helped little Johnny down at the boxing club to do X, Y and Z. And whilst that's granted and it's fine, we just didn't want to be an organisation that's constantly doing that. So we wanted the foundation to be, okay, let's try and go on this funding journey. Funding pays for practically everything that we provide, and it's just about building and then getting to the point where some of the larger organisations are actually the funders. I've got credibility and we've got a track record where they're funding everything from our salaries to everything that we provide.
And that's the reason to why you've been invited here.
Okay.
Because of the business model that you've taken, you get what I'm saying, in terms of funding. So the fact that you guys had already identified that you didn't want to be putting your hand in your pocket to go and fund things from the off jump, you like have gone down the funding route. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there that don't even understand that that's an avenue that they can go down, you get me?
Facts.
So I want you lot to speak on that.
So in terms of the funding, for any organisation, you're going to start with a small grant. So you've got various sizes of funding. You've got a small grant, which is typically from £300 to nowadays you're looking at £20,000, whereas before it would be £10,000. But I think with COVID and the cost of living crisis, it's kind of increased, so more funding accessible. Then you've got like a mid-range grant, which is from 20k to roughly between 50 to 75, and then anything above 75 is classed as a large grant. So for the first 5 years, from 2015 to 2018, we were running off 10k grants every now and again, 10k, 5k, and we were working as volunteers, so we'd all have full-time jobs, but in the evening we'd come to a SportsKey session to help deliver activities. And then it wasn't until 2019, I think it was, when we got our first mid-range grant, and that enabled me to then leave my full-time job, which is always the ambition. And we always said internally, once one of us get our foot in the door, there's no turning back for us. And then beyond that, I think it was 2021 when Dan was able to get his foot through the door through our first large grant through the National Lottery. And it's just been a crazy journey.
Yeah, can I just touch on so you explain a situation that happens across a lot of sectors. There's a lot of middlemen making a lot of money. This is a question for across the table. Do you think there's a change in that now? Do you think there's a lot of middlemen in multiple sectors that are now people are going direct to the funding source or direct to the top of the ladder?
Yeah,
depends how lazy you are, innit? That's what it is, isn't it? Like, obviously, I just think a lot of business ideas require funding, especially when there's a passion involved. You get what I'm trying to say? So you could be sitting there thinking of a great idea of how you want to help people, but sometimes trying to source that funding yourself is going to cause you more problems than you think. When, like you said, there's people out there that will fund ideas. There's governments that will back your idea and then make it viable, which can then turn into a business. You get what I'm trying to say?
Definitely.
Sometimes some ideas is not worth risking your own money. Like,
Definitely.
you need some sort of backing behind you for it to work.
I just want to know how you had that mentality back then. Like, where did that come from? Because the question that Sam just asked you in terms of like middlemen and people cutting them out and going straight to the source, there's now more people trying to do that because of education. So social media, there's a lot more information that's accessible for people to know that. But in 2013, I don't feel like it was as accessible. So what gave you like the foresight?
Can I ask, how old are you now?
I wish you didn't ask.
Still below 40, 37.
Yeah, but you see, to me, that's not old. And that's the ages where you're supposed to just kind of have everything kind of put together anyway. And I'm thinking, where was I 10 years ago? And I was not thinking about grants and funding and putting that all together. So like, I would say that you probably was ahead of your time.
The joke is, from my perspective, we could have accelerated SportsKey earlier than we did. I think it was probably going back to Speedy's comment, not about laziness, but we was probably career minded. We was probably, this is the sector we want to try and achieve and elevate in that sector. And for me personally, whilst we had SportsKey and I always knew long term that was going to be the vehicle, I reached a point in my sector where I knew I hit a cap. I knew a cap and they weren't letting me through or weren't letting me beyond that cap anyway. Do you get what I mean? And ultimately, it was kind of like the work that I was doing was kind of becoming boring and monotonous. And I suppose for me, SportsKey was always the thing that drove me. But I think going back to the part of the question from Sam, there's always going to be gatekeepers, and I describe them as gatekeepers. And I think years ago when we first started SportsKey...
Close to the mic.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There's always going to be gatekeepers, and I think years ago when we first started SportsKey, we're talking 2013, and probably for a lot of people, young people, because we were young men back then, in order to start a business, maybe back then, you're probably looking at a shop front, or you're looking at a store, or you're looking at something physical where you've got to go to a man and say, let me rent this or let me utilize this. We've come to a situation now, you've got social media, you've got other ways of making money. You don't necessarily need to go to those same traditional sources to run your business. Do you know what I mean? So I think we've been able to take advantage of that, and in our sector, because of my knowledge, Jeb's knowledge, we just know where the funding is and we know how to access it. We know the buzzwords, we know the approaches. So that's helped us when it comes to funding. And of course, we've developed relationships with funders in our time, in our professional experience, and now, so that's helped us in regards to funding in particular.
Have you ever thought about kind of packaging that knowledge and selling that as a service to other organisations, or is it kind of a thing where like everyone's fishing in the same pond? Or
we have thought about packaging it, but I suppose it's nothing we've actually just brought to market because we're so busy on our current things where we haven't looked at. Because the other thing is as well, we've by no means clocked the mission or clocked the game. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Our model is funding, but our next step is how do we become more enterprising. I always say, at the minute, SportsKey has got a great, what I call community inventory. So we've got loads of things in the community that we do, but we're a social enterprise, so we've got the social bit, but now we need to focus on the enterprise bit, so we need to focus on what can we package that sells, how can we look at our community and say, okay, what can they afford, what is the stuff that we can probably place in the market. So the answer is no, but it is something that's crossed our mind. We just haven't brought them products as yet, but that is our next phase, basically.
All this is very interesting to me because like, where you're 10 years into understanding funding, knowing that you need that social enterprise, I'm probably like 2-3 years in.
I'm 1 year in. Not even that. Zero. I'm at the beginning.
Yeah, so I'm like on the flip side of that now, where a big part of what I do is social housing, helping vulnerable adults into quick accommodation with support to help them to move into education, work, or independent living. So essentially, I have a social enterprise, but it started from the enterprise side of it, where really I'm in property, I've got properties, I've got access to properties. What's the best strategy to make sure that these bed spaces are full and generating some form of revenue? It just so happened that we had service accommodation, student and professional HMOs, and then eventually settled on, you know what, let's just work with the council and help vulnerable adults and just really do that super well. It was only probably about 2 years in, I realized, actually, you know what, this is actually quite a charitable deed that is happening here. And actually, I could support people better if I was getting additional funding to help them. The council have no problem with me doing that. So tell you what, I'm going to set up a CIC. I have the CIC now, I've done all that. Where do I get the money from? So when you start talking about it's up to 20 now, but it used to be 10. I know exactly what you're talking about because I've literally just put in the bid for the 20. So just to say some names, Lottery Awards for All is one of the organisation that will you know what, the barrier is actually quite low, I think, in terms of if you put a decent bid together and it makes sense, that's probably where people should go. Provided you have a CIC and you set up in the correct way, it's probably the lowest barrier to entry in terms of the getting money. So 10 grand from them, super easy. The new 10 grand is 20 grand from them now. Obviously, you should take this money and actually use it for the good of people. You have 100%. To do what you said you was going to do. You have to get good evidence and reporting and feedback to say this was a success, or don't.
Otherwise, you're never going to get money again.
That's what I'm saying. This is not a hustle.
That's what people do, man.
It's not a way of getting up in life. No, do what you said you was going to do. Put in realistic cost in terms of your fees for delivering the program, but. Come on, it's charitable donations. It's grant. It's funding.
What would they consider as a success then? So let's say you get the 20 grand, you do all the stuff. What did they want to see as an outcome that says that the funding was used correctly and it was a success within the community?
I think ultimately there's a few parts to this, to be fair, that I just want to try and unpack. I think the first part is just the context of funding, and I suppose the step change for me was ultimately when the unfortunate passing of George Floyd happened. For me, there was very much a push. There was almost like a global awakening and sort of consciousness of the sort of injustice and systematic barriers that particularly black-led organisations and people face. So for me, at that point, there was a lot of funders now saying we really want ethnic-led, black-led organisations to come and access funding. And Mike mentions the lottery, Walsh Road, that is probably one of the best starting points because the barrier to entry is really low on that one. And I would encourage that everyone could do that themselves. But I suppose the amount of funding that's out there is actually enormous in terms of what's out there, what's available, how much you can access, but there's building blocks to get there. But at that time, I remember speaking to funders, and what they was actually saying is there's all this wealth of funding that's out there for organisations in the community, but they ain't coming to us. They ain't applying, they're not coming to us. And then what that was is a vicious cycle where people from the community who had never applied before, they ain't got the confidence to know how or know where it is to apply. And when they did, because the people behind the table assessing them have a perception, because it was told to us straight when it came, we was on a workshop and it was told to us straight that ethnic people, when it comes to writing funding and having funding, they look at it a certain way, they've got a perception, and we need to have a higher level of credibility. So that might be our website. We need to make sure our website displays some of the work we do. Accounts, we need to make sure our accounts are demonstrating the work that we do. So yes, we've got to do a bit more, but there was a point where we weren't even applying. So the first thing is to apply, because the context for us is very good, and the geographical and the landscape for us is very good. In terms of...
Sorry, can I build on that point? Because that's a big point there. And like, I know you'll know this, but like for me, I'm probably applying for a bid every single week now.
Okay.
And I'm probably getting 30% of them.
Okay.
But you have to go through the nose for one. Like, you have to be willing to accept that not everyone's going to accept you. So some of the bids that we have had, Screwfix Foundation. Most people wouldn't even realize that Screwfix actually even have a grant side. And what that really is something called their CSR budget, corporate responsibility, which is a bit of a tax write-off because it's it's an
Well, they
expense.
have to do it, innit?
But at the same time, it shows them to be within the communities that they're serving and giving back and all that kind of stuff. Tesco will have one, Lloyd's, TSB will have, all of these people will have them, but they don't really publicize it like that. If you're looking for it, you'll know where to go, you'll find it. But if you're not looking for it, then
definitely.
You know what I mean?
On that point, I suppose our biggest thing is having someone in the organisation, because ultimately you need to make sure this is given a considerable amount of time, not amount of time, but someone in the organisation has eyes on it, basically. Because whilst you mentioned earlier the enterprise bit, yes, leverage your enterprise bit because that's what you're doing, but actually there's a whole wealth of income and funding here that's not being leveraged and utilised. Do you know what I mean? If you do it smartly, actually the funding helps support all of the things that are going on with the business, basically, but in a charitable way. But just before I go there, just going back to Screwfix and have someone in the business that's on it or got eyes on it, even if they haven't got a knowledge of how to write it, someone that can look at where funding is. There's a umpteen newsletters that are out there pretty much every week that shows funding here, funding there. We get quite overwhelmed.
Wait, you got a list?
Yeah. So we use different sources from
like
SportsKey to NVCO, who are like a voluntary sector organisation, charity that send out various information. So NVCO is a good one. Grant Finder's a good one. We use one called SportsKey, but they're more for the sport market. But they will send us updates like pretty much every 2 weeks, 3 weeks about what new funding's out there. It gets to the point where they're sending us new newsletters and we ain't even got through the old one. Do you know what I mean? So it's quite vast and you've got to be on top of it, basically. And then for us, we just dedicate time each week for someone to identify a fund, whether it suits some of the work we're doing, how we'd utilise it, and we get someone to write it. And we've now in a position where we've actually got a person that comes in and actually writes our bids for us, basically. We started off doing it ourselves, but realised it's so important to the organisation. We have someone that we pay for someone to come in and write that, but we're in a fortunate position to be able to do that at the minute. But yeah, starting point is newsletters. Just have a look at what's out there.
One of the reasons why I don't want you to go through it too quick is because there's a lot of value in what you're saying. It's 10 years deep. It's very easy for you to just slide past a lot. People, if anyone's watching this right now, and especially for when we break this down into reels, I want it to just be like step by step. So like even just to hide the idea of mailing lists, like there's people out here that will compile all the information for the bids, and that's just their hustle. Like you can even pay them. I used to pay someone like £10-20 a month just to be on their mailing list because they were particularly good at getting them together. But once you really get in, you see there's a lot of free places you can get them. But
can you also clarify that anyone can take advantage of these grants? Because there's a lot of people that will have business initiatives or ideas, but because they think that there's not a charitable aspect to it, that they feel that they don't, like, it doesn't apply to them. So you guys are doing sports, it's community led. We can all see the charity in it. Mike's doing social housing. You can see the charitable aspect in it. But let's say you've got like a photography business. Like obviously I'm referring it to me, but not just me. Like anyone. Let's say you've got like a haircut business or anything like. You can still take advantage of those things, innit? And that's only just dawned on me. Remember, I spoke to you in the weekend. Like, I've only just realised that you actually can take advantage of it, even though you haven't got a business that's...
Flip the question around. And you are a photographer. This is what you do. This is your whole situation. Can you give an example of any grants that would be relevant to him as a photographer? How could he use what he's already got, his whole setup, and take advantage of some of this stuff? How would that look for someone like him?
I think it depends on, you have to understand what your aim and objective is.
I'm actually talking about this right now on my Instagram as you say that, because I personally believe that everything is based around you having like a mission. So if you've got a mission there, you can then attribute that to somebody else that can see the mission and you can get things from it. You get me? So everyone here that knows that I've got a creative project called All White No Hype, and that's like, it's all about consumerism, like changing the consumerism habits of people who are within the sneaker community. You get what I'm saying? But that can be charitable now that I've started looking at things And even after this conversation, I'm starting to see that there's an aspect of it where you can hold classes about how you go about spending your money, like all of these different types of things, and so I could actually go down that lane, but I never knew that before. You get me? So
just to give 2 examples that are on top of my head. First thing is just like how many homeless people or underprivileged young people don't have good footwear?
Yeah.
What's the stats?
But the maddest thing is there's a page that I've come across, and all they do is give away white Air Force Ones, but they're obviously funding it because it's a chat. But I didn't know that. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, so this is like a proper enlightening conversation, like personally for me, because I'm taking things away from it. You get me?
And then you got a situation where like how many young people or just people coming from impoverished backgrounds want to get into the space that you're in, but maybe can't afford the training or can't afford the materials, equipment that are needed to do so. If you can just make a project around, I'm going to take someone from here, a low situation, I'm going to put them through this program, and by the end of it, they're going to have certain skills and abilities, and in fact, they can come work with me where I'm going to give them an apprenticeship, which is also even another thing that can be funded.
Okay. Yeah, I get it.
All right, I can see how that's cool. All right, cool. I'm happy to give you 10, 20 grand for that.
Yeah.
But yo, you need to show me at the end of it 10 youths that went through the program. Now they're able to like have at least a level 1, level 2 in whatever the relevant qualification would be.
If you were to look at where you go next, because you don't even have to set up a business, you know, you can create what's called an unincorporated organisation where you're just a voluntary group. So all you need with that is a team of volunteers, a constitution, which is a governing document, and a business bank account. And literally you can just create a project and apply for funding if you didn't want to go down a business route, and then you can kind of take it and build on it from there.
Is that before a CIC?
Yeah. So that's a step before a CIC, before needing to become formal per se. Do you know what I mean?
Like a sole trader of a CIC equivalent kind of thing.
It's more like it's a social enterprise, but without the business acumen to it.
And that needs to be registered with Companies House. So effectively, you're just a voluntary group with a bank account, and that's how a lot of sports clubs operate. They're not actually registered. They're just and some funders will fund entities like that. So if you take a Waterloo, the one that you referred to earlier, Mike, they will fund you just having a business bank account and having what's called a constitution, which is a document which you can throw up in like 2 minutes. But I want to just sort of take it back to what you both mentioned in terms of examples, because I think it's two-pronged, because you could set up a project which is purely around your CIC, your unincorporated organisation, which is, as a photographer, I want to give back to young people and support them with photography training or upskilling or whatever it may be, and it's down to how you justify that to the funders. And that could be a project in its own right that's justifiably fundable. The other side of it, and probably going to maybe Mike's example, is where you have got sort of social housing, which is partly profitable but partly helping and supporting people, and a CIC. And I suppose some people or entities have a CIC and have a limited company, and what they'll do is they'll utilise the funding for the CIC, so that's paying for everything that the CIC needs to run, operate, salary, so on and so forth. But actually, the business might be the best placed business to provide some of the services that the CIC needs. So as opposed to you, say you might need photography or marketing, within your company, you might have Courtney, who's a photographer. It's better for you to pay Mike social housing than it is to go and find some photographer to come and take pictures or do the work externally. So even happens in big businesses and big charities where they've got a business and then they've got a charity. But what you find is when you look underneath the carpet, there's a circle of investment, and as long as you can justify that, do you know what I mean? It's a means of keeping that equitable circle of finance running in the organisation, but you're paying justifiably the organisation to provide some of the services, but it depends on what services the business provides, and can it provide the services to the CIC. But in actual fact, you'll find that because the CIC is quite linked to the business, they're often quite closely aligned. So I can't say this example, that example. Is for everyone to sort of compartmentalise. If you have got a business and you have got a CIC and do you get funding, all right, what part of that can my business provide, and what part of that can I use to pay the funding the business to then provide? Is that making some sort of sense?
Yeah, man.
You got it.
A lot of value, man.
Yeah, and I'll give an example of how I use it. I got a limited company in a CIC. My limited company pays for the bricks and the mortar and maintenance of the property. Like literally everything bar someone being supported. Then the CIC now is everything bar the bricks and the mortar and the roof and the gas and electric. Everything that goes into actually caring for someone. So in an ideal world, on the limited side, I'm being paid the housing benefit. We're going to work on making sure the house is everything it needs to be. And then the CIC, any grant funding I get from that, that's where all my support staff are and paid for. And with that, we can do great programs, we can do great support, and we can do all kind of wonderful things, non-related to property.
Yeah, but just to touch on that, because we talked about property, and I don't want to come off tangent, don't want to digress too much, but you've got revenue funding, which is what Jeb's referring to, 0 to 10 small grant, 75 medium grant, large grant, anything thereover, which can pay for anything from salaries to equipment to coaching to photography, videography.
That's where you guys are at now.
That's where we sit revenue, but you've got capital. So there's funding out there called capital funding, which will pay for anything from building modernisation to extending a building to putting a disabled toilet in, and that's capital. And that's something that a lot of organisations, especially from my community, are not aware of. That there's revenue and there's capital.
I ain't heard of that one still.
So again, where you've got a social housing provider and you've got a CIC, there's an element of the social housing that deals with buildings and properties. So there's an element of how do you make that work for you in terms of extending buildings. The only key caveat with the building thing is you've got to have ownership of the building to some degree. So you've either got to own it or you've got to have at least a 7-year lease, basically. But a 7-year lease isn't like, it's not astronomical in terms of having a lease of that ilk. Do you know what I mean? Because what they don't want is, okay, you've got a 2-year lease, do all this development to your site, and then the landlord saying, oh, like, do one, do you know what I mean, after 2 years, and they've given you all this funding to provide something for the community in that space. They want to know that you're going to be there for at least 7 years providing that service. So there's two arms to funding as well that not many people are aware of that's out there.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, completely. So yeah, man.
Sort of. but without giving too much secrets away, I suppose where we want to get to, or sort of where we sit, is we've got very much the community inventory in our sort of CIC set well in terms of community work and whatnot. It's the enterprise bit that we index, and we need to build in all the services that the CIC does into the enterprise. So at some point, we're actually funding, yes, but actually the enterprise is providing some of the services. And just to give a real basic example, we have young people that we upskill at the minute, football, netball, so on and so forth, and they will come and help coach. But at some point, we'll move them to the enterprise, and they'll be contracted to the enterprise. But then the funding will pay the enterprise for us to then release them back to the CIC. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Let me ask
But
you
with
this
that,
question.
go on, sorry.
So I've actually put in fact, we've been awarded some money from Sports England.
Okay, brilliant.
So with that now, we are going to be reaching out to people like yourselves and say, can you actually help? We're now becoming
You'll be in the middle, man.
because we haven't got no background of sports, but we know that sports is very important for like bringing communities together and just promoting good health and fitness and even mental health. So we want to do this for our residents. So essentially, we would be running like a program that might last over 6 months, where maybe 2 times a month we rent out a community centre, and then someone like yourself would come and deliver that.
Okay.
Would that be the enterprise side that you're talking about, where we're just paying you?
In future, it will be the enterprise side. Where it sits at the minute is in the CIC side. But we want to get it to the enterprise side for the exact same reason that you've just said, because
Like, it would just be me saying, well, what's your price for an hour?
yeah,
And what can you do within that time? Well, if you want this, is this, and if you want this, is this.
And to give you an example, because I don't want to go too, we've sort of moved on from organisational structures, but as the CIC as it currently stands, we'll send our young people to I keep calling it Mike Properties, I'm just going to use that just for a hypothetical scenario. We'll send them to Mike Properties, we'll charge whatever it may be. That money has to come to our CIC, but stay within the CIC, because that's how a CIC operates. We send our young people from SportsKey Enterprise to Mike's Property. It comes back to the enterprise, but that money is freely available to do what we want it to do. Whether we want to pay ourselves as directors, whether we want to jump on a plane to Jamaica.
I think that's important to touch on.
Okay.
The idea of seriously protecting the money that's in the CIC. Anything that goes into the CIC is not for playing, not for messing around with. You've got to account for every penny, because you may be asked to produce records to say, how did you spend this money? 100%. And you cannot see a trip to Jamaica on that. You know what I mean? Or a car payment.
I've seen it. I have seen it though.
It happens.
Yeah.
But that's why people don't make it to the top tier, 75 plus, paying for the whole company, because you can't be trusted with even like the 10s and the 20s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but explain that though, because you've again, why do you want to get it over to the limited side? Why do you want to have the enterprise? Why do you want that control? And what control don't you have on the CIC side?
So with the CIC,
Close to the mic.
oh, sorry, my bad. Keep
It's all
cranking
good.
back like I'm in my yard. With the CIC, there's certain structural elements of having a CIC which are a bit prohibitive, basically, but in a good way. Because when we started the CIC, we started in 2013. Some of the structures that are out there now weren't there before, so we could have been a charity, but the charity is a lot of red tape. We're gonna have trustees and so on and so forth. As 3 young men, we didn't want a bag of trustees making all the decisions, so we said, being a CIC allows us 3 to be directors, we retain control, and we don't have to have directors on top of that. Being a CIC, the money that comes in has to get reinvested back in the organisation. However, we can still pay ourselves salaries from it. We can't pay dividends. We can't just, we've made this amount of money and just pay the directors dividends. You can, but to a certain amount, we're limited, basically.
I think it's 35%.
Yeah.
Of the profit.
So, and the other side of it, again, as being young men, we was quite well protected to be a CIC. So I think the going nominal rate is like £1. So anything pops off, something goes wrong, drastically wrong, the organisation falls, we're all personally liable for £1. Do you know what I mean? And that was quite important at that point. Probably more important now because we own more than we did back then, if that makes sense personally. So we were just heavily protected as a CIC, but it didn't allow us to be that enterprising, profit-making venture, do you know, at that point. Do you know what I mean? But the money has to stay within the CIC. But the reason why we are the enterprise is for all of the above, where we are doing workshops or we are thinking about things that might make money, whether that be parties, whether that be some stuff we're looking at around businesses and corporates. The business basically gives us a lot more flexibility to pay directors, to pay dividends, to pay young people a salary that they would probably more happy with them having. It just gives us a lot more freedom, whereas the money within the CIC is ring fence. So every funding that comes in, we have to budget. This is that fund there. This is how much they're paying. Here's the budget lines. Here's my salary. Here's Jeff's salary. Here's the equipment budget. So we have to monitor that quite closely, and then every fund has a different budget that we monitor and just ensure that the money stayed within the organisation. The key thing that you mentioned, though, in terms of when we started this, we knew where we wanted to get to. I think some people start this with the idea of getting funding, and they don't really think about it long term.
They don't think they're going to get the funding.
They don't think they're going to get the funding. What they do, they burn their bridges too early. And then what they do is they spend the money on themselves. I've heard people giving themselves like directors' loans and things like that, and then not paying it back. And then in the instances where the funder does come back to you and you've got nothing to show for it, it becomes problematic for you. Do you know what I mean? When I think actually if you started something, just not play the game, but get the funding. The funding is quite widespread in terms of you can do a lot with it of what you said in the application you want to do anyway. Do you know what I mean? So just do the project, do the program to the best of your ability, and actually you realise it opens up a lot more for you, and you can always still have the business that you dream of having as a side part piece or as another mission, but the CIC can always back up some of that other work as well, long term.
So you have to have that long-term vision in
Yeah.
this game,
A lot of us saying, again, going back to it, we don't start things with a long-term vision sometimes in our community as well. Do you know what I mean? And that's the problem, strategizing.
Even when we started the organisation, 2013, we didn't start delivering until 2015. So for 2 years, all we were doing is strategizing, creating a long-term strategy for ourselves. So it was very difficult in that time period for us to fail because we knew exactly what we wanted to do, what direction we needed to go to, what funders to target, etc. And I think that's what enabled us to be sustainable. And it's almost like now we've come to a period of time where we're at a stage where we've got a new strategy in place. So it's almost like we're back at the beginning, where now we're looking at more enterprise stuff as opposed to the community side of things. So
back at the beginning, but at a different level.
But at a different level. Yeah.
What gave you that? What made you at that age 10 years ago even think on that level? Like what inspired you to think that way?
Firstly, it's passion. As I say, we've always come from a sporting background, and we've seen where the gaps are, we've seen where the money's been going. So if passion drives you, you have sleepless nights to the point where it's effortless. And because we had certain knowledge within how to access certain funding, etc., it just kind of came natural to us. So
did you have anyone to support you, any like elder people or any mentors or anything like that, or was it just kind of trial and error?
Yeah, I think
we had a business mentor.
We had a business mentor from an organisation called ICE, didn't we?
Yeah.
But that was good in a sense where they helped us register the company and helped us with some tips around how we should run and operate. But I wouldn't say there was like on us like every day or every month. It was kind of like
Was that funded?
sporadic.
Was that funded to you?
Yeah, we had 12 hours
Yeah.
worth of free advice, basically.
So long ago, I forgot. Just surprised to remember the name of the organisation. But that was pivotal at that time because it was a stepping stone with someone saying, do it this way. Do you know what I mean? And that's where I have conversations where a lot of organisations just need someone to do a little bit of hand-holding with them. Do you know what I mean? Just think about doing it this way, because through our community practice, which is what I mentioned earlier, we have different organisations that sit on it. And it's kind of like, we've gone through beer workshops, but what happens is because people have got full-time jobs and because they're volunteering in the evening, putting on their service, whether that's dance, music, whatever it is, they ain't got time to take that knowledge off the shelf and actually use it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's why our next thing is, how do we we can't do everything though, do you know what I mean? But how do we kind of help other organisations with that helping hand, do you know what I mean? So that's the next thing we're looking at with that bit of community practice work. But in terms of strategising from the start, it's where we come from. Like we was in sports development, so that was the way they operate, do you know what I mean? There's like age-old saying, failing to plan is planning to fail. So ultimately that always stuck with me, and I knew that with SportsKey, whilst we're not business minded, we've got to have some idea of where we're going, and then we just kind of had a very quick 10-page strategy document, and every 3 years we re-strategize and recreate that document to say this is where we're going over the next 3 years, basically.
It's ironic because I remember, I think it was 2017, we tried to go for a large part of funding, and we was unsuccessful. And I remember at the time, you know, it set us back. We were thinking, you know what, why, you know, we thought we was ready, but looking back now, we wasn't ready. I hadn't even had any experience working within sport development. I haven't built up my own networks, and then around that period, I got a job within sport development, built up my network, and by the time it was time to go full time within SportsKey, I've already kind of had the knowledge, so that helped me within my role within the organisation. But I think had we have done it in 2017, we possibly would have failed.
The joke is as well, just to quickly add to that, is we do, the amount of bids we get through a year is crazy, and we have more failures than we do successes, and I think that needs to kind of be highlighted as well, because I think people do one bid and they fail and it's off. Do you know what I mean? But it's easy to do, isn't it? Because where I've kind of described this thing where people ain't got the know-how, then you do bid.
What's the smirks about over there, man?
He's pointing at me.
You put in when he's dead and the man done good bids.
I did a one bid and it didn't go through.
Talk about it. What bid was it? What was it for?
Arts Council. You get me? But it wasn't me that was writing it. It was somebody else. But there's a load of different things that happened.
That's a very hard bid.
I get it. But I was disheartened. But I was disheartened more because when I thought that the application was put in, it hadn't been put in. So I sat down for a year thinking that something had happened, and then it happened. So you get me?
Just take a step back, because what we're talking about now is using bid writers to actually deliver the bids that you're trying to go for.
It was a bid writer though.
I know it was a bid writer, but that's what I'm saying. Like at this point, I've used bid writers now. I've paid for them. I've had some work. I've had some not work. I've had some work after fighting with them for like 6 months, and I realised after a while you can actually just write them yourself. It's not that deep, and sometimes it's even better if you write it yourself because it's authentic. Provided you know, you read it properly. It's almost like answering a test, and you know sometimes in school you might fail a test and say, but did you read the question? Did you actually answer what they want? It's just one of them.
And on reflection, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's why. Sorry, I like what you said when you just said you look back now and you said, you know what, actually I wasn't ready, but at the time it sounded like, why are we even doing this? But that shows a level of maturity, but you only get that in time when you say, actually, I know what a good bid looks like now. I know what a good performance looks like. And you know what? I weren't ready to even. I was kind of even being cheeky to ask for that at that time.
Trust me. But I would always encourage people to write their own bids. Yes, there's a level of know-how, but you get that from failure. Do you know what I mean? And then reflecting, and they'll tell you what the issues are, and you go again. Do you know what I mean? And I think ultimately, as Mike mentioned, no one knows your organisation better than you. Do you know what I mean? And yes, you will have bid writers and people out there that can support you. And I'm not saying not to use them, but you've got to have a halfway house balance, basically. We are where we are because we do it ourselves, ultimately, or we have done it ourselves for 10 years. Do you know what I mean? But I think our organisation has grown to a point where we've got so much going on that we do it ourselves, and we have an external bid writer just so we're on top of the ball. But the reason why we were so successful is because every bid is coming from a place of passion with us. Do you know what I mean?
So this is what I was
we're
going to ask.
very meticulous in everything we're putting in.
What would be the reason why a bid would be rejected?
I'll tell you some reasons. Go on.
Go on.
Well, the first one is eligibility. Sometimes every bid's got an eligibility criteria, so you've got to be the right organisation. Sometimes people are an unincorporated association, so a voluntary organisation, as we spoke about earlier, and they're going through a bid where you have to be a CIC. Sometimes it's simple as funders want you to have 3 directors, and some organisations only got 2, but they haven't read the criteria enough to understand that that's what's happening. Signatories on a bank account, some of them require to have a bank account, but have 2 people that are connected to it. Some organisations have 1 and then become upset because they find that out and say you need to have 2. Sometimes it's down to need. You haven't described what people are saying in your community enough as they're concerned. Do you know what I mean? There's a multitude of reasons, to be fair.
I got knocked back on one because I said they couldn't see how we were tied in enough with the community. Because a lot of these bids is like, how are you bringing how are you reaching the community, or how are you bringing the community together? So in my mind, I'm thinking naively, I got houses all over. I'm housing everyone. Like, what are you talking about? I'm in the community.
But that's why I'm asking this question, because obviously because people can have the best intentions for a bid, but it might not translate in how you write in your bid and who it's for.
And you have to ask.
You get what I'm saying? But then there might be other ones that are kind of like undeniable in terms of a gap in the market, and you reaching the community in a way that no one else has thought of before.
The joke is sometimes you have to be a bit shrewd though. You've got to really look at some of the funders and mirror their language. Almost, you know what I mean? One time,
about what you want sometimes.
One time we had a bid early days where we used sport all throughout the bid, and then we got knocked back, and then we changed
participation.
We changed the word now. We changed from sport to physical activity.
Not everyone can do sport.
And not everyone can do sport.
People are scared of the word
sport. So when you say physical activity now, it sounds a bit more less hardcore, less from a safeguarding perspective, risk assessment, the sound and the language of that. But you have to look at the funder. Okay, cool. We run sport in it, but the funder wants social cohesion and wants people coming together. But you know what? How about with sport? We're massive advocates of sport. But we know through our work, the biggest power of our thing with sport is it's always bringing people together. People are meeting people from new walks of life, new backgrounds, and making new friendships. So all we're telling that funder about, because they're interested in cohesion and the community come together, is about all the cohesion and the community come together. Sport's just like a little byproduct that gets them there. But once they're there, it's about them coming together. So you really got to focus in on the funders saying they want cohesion, or they're saying sport or participation, or they're saying, they really want children and young people. You know what I mean? You've just got to really focus on, okay, how does my thing deal with children and young people, even though that might not be the core thing that I think all the time. Do you know what I mean?
Try and get into the mind of the funder. Like, it's not us on the other side of that computer or picking up that piece of paper. It's someone maybe a little bit older, from a different background, and I just want it very simple in a way they can understand. Like, we're young, we're using fast words, we're moving fast, and I don't want it. That's, you know what, this is too much for me. Put that to the side. So,
true.
Yeah.
You reckon it's a good thing to work your way backwards in terms of looking at the long term and the biggest funding, and then working your way to the smallest steps to how you get there, if that makes sense?
That could be one approach. To be fair, it's not something we've actually considered, but it could be one approach because
I'm looking at funding, and I was thinking, like, my overall end goal is to have the largest content space with the biggest production team to raise the level of content in the city.
Okay.
Do you get it? So obviously on a long term, that's a big investment. But short term wise, it could start off with just equipment pieces, going to the local communities, helping out, showing people how to make content, use certain facilities, and even creating things with them, different types of people.
I think these discussions are good for this, because you start to understand, like, what is a lot of money and what's not. So, like, I know some dance organisations that get between 250 and 400,000 a year. That's just locked in. But I see what that does, and I see what they have to do for it, and they do great work. So when you're saying you want the largest one, in my mind there's already a ceiling, because I'm saying, well, I know what great looks like in terms of providing a facility for people to do dance, and they're going like all around the world with it, and they only get like 400. So if you want to go above that, like, we'd have to go and find those examples. But having conversations with, like you've mentioned, all right, 75 is where it starts to go to another level. I didn't really know that. For me, 50 would be like, 50's mad. But I know I want like 250 a year for my organisation to be like, all right, we're great for where I want to go. So, like, it's about having these conversations and starting putting some realistic markers.
I'm on 750.
Not a mercy. Not a mercy.
Yeah. But what are you willing to? What does that look like? What would even? How many people would be helped for that? Like, you can start big like that. We have to know what those metrics need to be. What do they want to see for 750?
750.
How many people are now going to, like, going through your program and ending up in like high like Brit academies and all this as a result. That's what they're going to want to see. You know what I mean?
To touch on that point, again, it's around monitoring and evaluation. That's a key part of how a business grows and how you demonstrate to funders that we're doing this thing. But what I would say, going back to Speedy's comment, it's quite a good one in terms of what we do is try and compartmentalize things. So we know long term, this is our end goal. These are all the functions of SportsKey that we want. We want a community program. We want a youth mentor and sport. We want volunteers. We want a community of practice, so on and so forth. Cool. That's how much all that will cost. So when we total it out and think about everything that's needed, like, it needs like 700 grand, that's a mazza. But to start off with, how about we just compartmentalize this part? Community program, running activities in the community. How much does that cost? Okay, cool, that costs 20 grand. Let's go to that 20 grand funder, start off there, demonstrate to them that we can do good work. We'll go to another funder for the youth sport program. We'll go to another funder for the volunteer program, and we build it that way. And then after we've exhausted them ones, it's like we'll go back. In some instances, we go back to the same funder. We've done a good job with that. Can we now take that to the next level? Then it's like, in our position now, yes, you can take it to the next level. And here, what we really want to know about where people come from, your data. So we're going to provide you with a monitoring evaluation consultant. So in our situation, our funders actually pay us for the data that they want to see. So they pay us to send someone in who's been appointed by us. So it's not like they're enforcing, like, you got to use this person. We've said in our funding, we want to use an M&E person. We want this person to do it. And they come in, they get the data from us. They churn it all out, make it make sense. And we give it back to the funder. And they see all the good work we're doing. But it's not us then having to learn statistical analysis and
that's something that scared that bothered me still. Like, I'm having to learn what you're talking about there, and I thought, how am I going to make sure this lottery? The last thing I've done now, I just spent some decent money on having like a lottery end of project lunch because I wanted everyone there. I wanted to remember when I said the guy bumped me. I paid money to a photographer to like do some nice visuals because I wanted to send it with the new application to say, look, we've done it. Got some like half alright photos, but I was supposed to get the nice visuals, and we did the resident feedback survey to show them, even though they didn't ask for it, that we've done the monitoring and evaluation. But
it's important though, and what I would say, not people, you know what it is, when you think about your budget and what you want to spend money on, no one's thinking, yo, I want someone to come in, I want to pay money out of my thing to get someone to come in and do data and whatnot. But what we realise is that, okay, cool, with the funding, we have a data capture system, so the funders pay for that. So that system now, anyone that comes through the door, we know who's got blue eyes, who's got brown eyes, what area they come from. So we've got a filter system that tells us that there's 1,600 people on the database. Not everything about them, but to an extent, you get what I'm saying?
You know what? I like that point that you just made, and I think it goes beyond just the funding thing. Because if you can show like the data and the feedback and all of that to whichever client you use, it's always going to put you in good stead. Because I remember I used to do some work with a store in Newcastle called N Clothing. They're a big company now, But in these times when I was going down there, I thought I was going down there to film the video for the audience online. They then told me later on that they was using my video to include in their deck that they're reporting back to the brand to show them how good the event was. And that's obviously put them further forward. And I didn't even realize that that's how I was being used. I'm interpreting that I'm being used in one way, but I'm being used in another, you get what I'm saying? And I don't mind that, but it's good to know that you have to be giving feedback at all times to show the value that you're providing, you get me?
Evidence is always needed.
Yeah, always needed. And for me, it's about building it in, so where we can get the funders. So like Mike's done a bid recently, if there was a system out there that helps capture the data, he could have said to the funders, we want to use this system that costs $1,000 a year, and they will pay for that because you're then giving them rich data that helps build what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? Not only does it help build what you're doing, but that data goes to them and provides them with intelligence that they might use with whatever geographical or policy things they want to look at. Do you know what I mean? And in the M&E, you might think, actually, I want someone to come in and write the report, so you don't have to. Do you know what I mean? So it's key things like that.
I think it's important to remember as well, there's a lot of money that they kind of have to give away, the need to give away, and not enough people are asking for it. And if you become the go-to person, they'll just give it. It sounds like you got to the point now where you've got like almost bespoke grants that are not really on, you can't go online and just find them. You're just having more of a personal conversation with some people.
To a degree, but it's still a transparent, open process. So we've got to still apply like everyone else. But of course,
You've
they
built
know
that
about our
relationship
track
now.
The
record,
rapport
you know what I
there, the
mean?
rapport there.
They know about our track record now, so it's a good place to be in. But yeah, but I would just encourage me personally, and again, it doesn't have to be the only go-to. It's just one of the go-tos within companies and organisations. Just trying to utilise the funding model. Not saying it's the only model. Still have your enterprise, still have your profit making. But there's no reason why you can't try and look at the funding model. And my sort of biggest top tips is, I suppose, you know what? Shout SportsKey, because we're here to help. Do you know what I mean? Shout us, we'll help in terms of tips. We run a community of practice which is trying to encourage and empower community organisations of how to do this stuff, how to do funding and other things. So therefore we run that program regularly.
How do people get in touch with you for that?
I made this alarm because the episode has to finish now.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
we've got
We've
school
got
run.
3 minutes.
You get me?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
let's
yeah,
wrap
yeah.
it up.
3
Okay,
minutes.
cool.
How do they get in contact with you for that community thing there?
practice.
Like, yeah. What is that?
Best place is probably Instagram,
Okay.
SportsKey official.
Just DM me.
Shout
Yeah,
first.
yeah, just
Okay.
DM.
Okay. What does the future hold for SportsKey? 5 years from now, what would
Yeah,
you?
where do you see yourself in 5-10 years from now?
I would say personally for me, it's that enterprise journey now. I think we're still always going to have a real strong funding model, because for us there's no reason not to, and our work sort of centres around that. But it's that enterprise journey now. So we've got a number of key things that we want to deliver on from a business perspective, and also I think there is an element where there's so much good work in our community through us and other people and organisations. One of the kind of real end goals is, can we create our own building, our own space, that almost like ethnic black hub where you've got sport, music, dance, a barbershop. It's almost that hub of bare things going on. Sinners can run from there as well.
Just that super last thing. Can you just quickly, just in a nutshell, say where are you at now and where are you trying to go in terms of what do you need funding for? If someone was listening to this and said, all right, I'm happy to fund Foundry and all that kind of stuff, or work with Foundry.
Foundry? No,
Yeah.
not Foundry.
Well, I guess Sinners.
Nah, I just did like the same conversation we had last week about you needing a service and not knowing the price and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I want to raise the level of content in the city.
Okay.
So it's,
so you're doubling down on the content.
yeah. So it's at least at the level of
production
what London
services.
is. Yeah, it's build infrastructure. So infrastructure through content.
Okay.
So like, there's a lot of people that want podcasts. There's a lot of people that want to do content. There's a lot of people with a lot of sick ideas, but they don't necessarily know how to do production. They don't necessarily know what it means to produce or use YouTube or optimize them kind of things. We're learning that all now, innit? So there's a service that we can provide that funding's needed to get to where we see. You know what I'm saying? Because it's helping the community at the same time.
Definitely. Because your Sinners is market leading, and the intellectual collateral that you guys have needs to be shared. Do you know what I mean? And ultimately, if you can create other content creators out there, and particularly aimed at young people, I think that would be a great project and a great initiative.
Yeah.
I think this is a great
conversation
episode.
to be had.
A lot of value in this episode.
We admire everything that you lot are doing as well. We look at it from outside in, and the branding in particular is something that we're trying to improve within what we do, particularly from a social enterprise space. It's not something that's highly promoted. Yeah,
That's why we're gonna link up.
Yeah, man.
Because we need to do some community projects. You get me?
And there's money for that.
Yeah. So,
But yeah, man, let's leave it there. Sick episode though.
Bless
Yeah,
them.
respect, lads.
Love.
Respect,
Yeah, man,
manners,
cool.
manners.
Thank you very much.
That was good, you know.